And you do know you have to authorize that so you remain in the class. And shalom, everybody. Good afternoon or morning or whatever, wherever you are. If you can see the window right at my hand, you can see right hand side, you can see the reflection of what's in the room, which tells you that it's very dark outside. This is 9 p.m. in Israel, and we are well into the evening. We had in the last couple of days the longest day like everybody else, so sunset was, as Israel goes, not as Montreal goes, but as Israel goes, pretty late, which is almost 8 p.m. in the evening. Let me just check with you, since and mainly because we are such a small class, if there is any leftover from previous classes, anybody who was thinking about something or had an issue with something that we have said or not said, this would be an excellent time to raise it as we go. So if there is anything like that, a question from last time, a comment about last time, this would be a perfect time to share it. I don't see anybody interested in that, so I am going to put on the screen of our new session for today, and this is it. So, and let us go. And as you can see, this is our plan with which we have started a while ago. This is our fourth session, and we are now going into what we called the Mizrachi voice. Okay, so, but this is not what I wanted. I am so sorry. Excuse me for a minute, and I will find the right session, hopefully. Let me just double check that I didn't close it per chance. I think this is the one. Okay, so let me share it with you. I hope, yeah, we are going to get the right one now. So can you see my PowerPoint, my slide now? We are on June 28th, and this is what I call the new Mizrachi voices. And I'd like to provide a little bit of explanation. I don't think that is the case, but just in case, I could be proven wrong at any time. Is anybody who is not familiar with the term Mizrachi? Who does not, you are not, okay? You see, never take anything for granted as a teacher and always check. So Mizrach is east. If you attend synagogues, you know that that's the way we refer to the wall in the synagogue, towards which oftentimes synagogues are structured in a way that we turn our faces, in your case, to the east, to where Jerusalem is. Mizrachi therefore becomes an adjective of people coming from the Orient, from the East, and that is nowadays, in contemporary times, the acceptable, politically correct term to use for Israeli citizens whose parents or grandparents nowadays, or they themselves, have arrived from Muslim countries. We used to call them Sfardi, the literal meaning of which is from Spain, because some of the communities who later ended up in Muslim countries, like the North African ones or the Balkan, originated from communities who had lived in Spain until the expulsion from Spain towards the end of the 15th century. It had become more politically correct to use the term Oriental or Mizrachi in Hebrew, which, by the way, you could find default with very easily, because if what we call these Jews as people who came from the East, then pray, please open a geographical map and check for me whether Poland or Morocco are more east from Israel. And you will find out that Morocco is way more to the west than some of the European countries that lie to the northwest of Israel, but much closer to the east. So the term is an accepted term, but not beyond that. It's relating to Jews who themselves or are descendants of Jews coming from Muslim countries. Why is it a particular, everybody comfortable with that, with my description? Anybody has an issue with my description? Okay, because we are treading here on slippery grounds. Because why do people coming from Muslim countries have a particular poetic voice of their own, or a political voice of their own? Because from the very early pre-state and into the early years of the state, and much into that later, there is more than a sense of, there is a discrimination on a socio-economical, oftentimes cultural levels. There is a way of a people, the creators, the people who established the state of Israel, mainly Europeans, referred to as Ashkenazim. Is that term familiar by anybody? Okay, so Ashkenazim versus Mizrachim. And so the poetry refers not only to the fact that we have a specific cultural voice, but you will find tones against discrimination, you will find tones of critique, you will find tones of a complaint, often a time. And when that happens, you will immediately have the reaction, how long will you complain? My parents suffered as well when they came to this country, etc. So the whole discourse is open, and I could spend all the 4 sessions that we had on Mizrachi voices poetry. And those of you who are interested in that, I call again to your attention my website, korozim.com, where you have recorded lectures. And Gloria, I don't know how many we have done on the Mizrachi voice. So if you, plenty. So just put in the search slot Mizrachi, and if you don't get at least 6 different sessions, then I must be wrong, but you'll get them, okay? Because we spent a lot of time with that. And with variations within, and then feminist voices within, etc. And we haven't covered it. What is my choice for today? And I need to share with you my pedagogic decision. When Rabbi Fishman, who apologized for not being able to attend today, he is escorting his children to summer camp. And for that, it's an American summer camp, so they are going from Israel by airplane. It takes time, and he cannot be with us. So when Mark and I have discussed the choices for this session, he was very enthusiastic about a relatively new series of sessions that I have developed in the last year. And it was developed on the basis, on the grounds, on the shoulders of the fact, or for an audience that had studied with me for 3 years. So I had time to build up the Arab voice, and I had time to build up the religious voice, etc., and the same with the Mizrachi. And I could easily do those new ones. When we started working together here, I realized how not very smart that choice was. And I realized that, especially with the Arab poetry for our first session, that I took you way into the extreme radical contemporary, while I could have started you with your Emil Habibi for a name from the 50s, and that would have been a more gradual entrance in the topic. And that would be true of the 2 others, but there I managed. Now I'm making a pedagogic decision. I'm not starting as I promised Mark. I am not starting with Shlomi Chatuka, very contemporary, very today, very radical, very political. I want to take you a little bit earlier to earlier years of the Mizrachi voice in Israel, and to get you a little bit more gradually in the topic. So for people like you, Gloria, what can I tell you? Repetition. But never mind. It's always good to look at the text again. Before I get you started, any quick questions? Anything that doesn't sound clear, that needs more elaborate explanations, let me know. And since I see nobody, neither raising hand nor unmuting, I am going ahead. And I now want to make sure that indeed I take you to my correct, here it is. Okay. So this is our poetry of the Mizrachi voices. And here is a slide that comes from one of my earlier sessions, which shows a variety of faces. I'm going left to right. So on the top left-hand side, you have a picture of a gentleman called Joe Amar, long gone. He was a singer, I would say, a combination of a light social opposition voice alongside very traditional music. So his would be a voice that will take a long time to break out of the intimate circles of weddings, celebrations, etc., of people coming from North Africa, of people more specific from Morocco. And only with one, two, three songs will he break on the radio in the 50s and the 60s when I'm growing up for the larger audience to be aware of him. So that's just one example, early Mizrachi voices. I continue from the left to the right, and here is Sami Michael still with us, an immigrant from Iraq this time, not Morocco. He's well over 90, and he came to the land of Israel as a new immigrant in the early 50s, not, I repeat, not because he was a Zionist, not because he was a refugee from Iraq. He needed to escape from Iraq because he was a communist. And as a communist, he was in danger there. And the easiest way, since he happened to be not only a communist but also Jewish, was to seek aliyah and absorption in Israel. But he is not coming with rah Jewish state, Zionist state. On the contrary, and from the beginning, since he is already a published journalist in Iraq, he will find work as a journalist. Where? In an Arab newspaper in Haifa, as with connection through the Communist Party, which was and still is practically the only political party in Israel that is totally joined Arabs and Jews. Most of our other parties are very divided between the Arab population and the Jewish population. So Sami Michael, novelist, a very unique voice. If you are into this kind of more than slightly political novels, remember his name, and quite a few of his novels are available in English. And if you are interested, I would say that a good place to start would be A Trumpet in the Wadi. A Trumpet in the Wadi. Wadi is valley, but the Wadi in Haifa is a neighborhood where Arabs and Jews live together, and a beautiful novel on the backdrop of the first war in Lebanon, namely the 80s. Okay, I am taking you to the right, and you will see the cover page of a book called Yeladot Tovot, Good Girls, and next to it, what to me is a very good-looking woman. This is my friend Gila, who was born with the name Vaknin and now is Danino, so both originally from a Moroccan name and married a Moroccan guy, so both the names Vaknin and Danino are that. Gila is a PhD at the head of one of the most successful colleges of art in Haifa, where she is a teacher. Her PhD is about the presentation of women, girl figures in Israeli children's literature. And she is the first in her family to have ever attended the university and then all the way to PhD. So I include her not because I teach her poetry, because she's not a poet, but just to say that the Mizrachi voice is now there, not only in the writing of literature, but in the critique and the reference books, such as her book about the representation of women in Israeli children's literature. Next to her on the right, a very contemporary, very successful Yemenite woman. So you can see that I'm leading you through Moroccan, Iraqi, Yemenite, the different voices. And we will study a poem by Adi Kesar, whom I know personally. I am saying the following mainly to Gloria, who attended my classes, so I'll step out for a minute. No, I don't need to step out for that. To say that we studied Adi Kesar in our classes, but she has such a stubborn opposition to Zoom that I could never persuade her to join our classes. And they said, Adi, 200 people, they not interested, not on Zoom. They should come to Israel. They should invite her to their communities. So, but I'll bring Adi's voice, which is excellent, to you. If we move to the lower level of my slide, I have a picture that discussing in full. I could again spend half of my session today. This is a shot from a movie that was made in Israel in the 60s, I'm going to say, maybe slightly later, called Salah Shabati. Salah Shabati is the main figure, the protagonist in a transit camp where immigrants from North Africa arrive. He is the figure in the middle. The actor is Chaim Topol, who portrayed Fiddler on the Roof. He just died recently. So this is, if you wish, a remnant of the time when movies or theater pieces about Mizrachim were made by Ashkenazim. The person who wrote the script, or actually the book, is Ephraim Kishon, an immigrant from Hungary. The main actor is also an Ashkenazi. So you had a cultural phenomenon like that where African Americans were not allowed on general stage, and white people painted their faces and pretended to be dark people for the sake of some sort of a cultural effect. So it wasn't that serious. You didn't need to paint your face, but we had that period. So many people still who remember Salah Shabati as screened oftentimes on Israel's Independence Day, etc. It's accompanied by songs. It was later made into a musical. So they remember with love this particular movie, which a person like that, like myself, would not consider teaching today, because it's like totally not politically correct to use these representations unless you want to include it in an academic presentation and so show it from a critical aspect. And last but not least, Shlomo Bar, a musician from Morocco, now much, much, much older. He is older than myself, and I am 77. This is from the 70s, when for the first time a theater play is shown in Israel in the Haifa Municipal Theater about the plight of immigrants from North African countries, so Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and such. And it is done in an interesting way. The only honest, authentic Moroccan person on that stage is Shlomo Bar and his orchestra, which is authentic Moroccan. The director of the play is Nola Shelton from the States. The writer of the script is Yoshua Sobol, an Ashkenazi playwright. And most of the actors were Ashkenazim, but why do I not consider it as the same as Salah Shabati? Because Nola Shelton, when she arrives at the early 70s in Israel, she brings with her the message of the community theater. So not a well-written play to be put on the stage, but rather go out into the community, interview people, hear their authentic voices, and bring them to the stage. So in spite of the fact that it is not all the way authentic, it's the beginning of authentic Mizrachi voice in Israel. Let me just double check with you that we are all fine and there are no comments or questions so far. The introduction is done and we are going into the poetry right away. So with that, I'm not taking you as early as the 70s. I'm taking you to maybe 15 years ago, but still not to the most recent and radical. We'll come to that. So for that, I need to teach you a term, and the term is in Latin. It's called Ars Poetica, has nothing to do with the Mizrachi voice. You can read the Wikipedia as well as I can do, and you know that it's a term in Latin. You can look it up. I'm reading because the letters are small. Ars Poetica, the art of poetry, is a poem written by Horace in the 19th century BC, in which the year 19 BC, in which he advises poets on the right of writing poetry. So if you study literature, you know that there is a whole genre, a whole group of poetic works when poets and writers talk about their art. And the name of this group of poetry or writing is called Ars Poetica. If you wanted to write Ars Poetica in Hebrew, you would write it with an Aleph. Aleph, Resh, Samich. Now put that aside because we are coming into a word play. So you know what Ars Poetica, writing the word Ars with an Aleph in Hebrew, would mean. That's the Latin academic term to that part of the world of literature. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is an Ars written with an Ayin. This is a derogatory term used to describe men who look like men in this picture. Loud, vulgar, smoking, not always shaved, not very well educated, mainly from Muslim countries, etc. So Ars is a derogatory term that Ashkenazi people would use to describe Mizrachi men that are not up to their level, not to their taste. And I tried to pick up a couple of characteristic pictures, probably not politically correct, but I am doing. And now comes a group of young people. I think the oldest among them is not yet 40. And creates a group called Ars Poetica. They are writing it with an ayin. And we are going, ladies and gentlemen, Ashkenazi people, to give you the poetics of the Arsim, our poetry, the Moroccan poetry, the Mizrachi poetry, and one of the best among them is Almog Behar. So let us start with a poem by Almog Behar. Almog Behar, who is one of the main activists of Ars Poetica, is now a teacher in the Tel Aviv University, where he teaches together with an Arab, actually Druze, Marzouk El Khalabi, from Daliat El Carmel, and they teach together these poetry of the extreme, the Mizrachi, the Arabs, and others, you know, the marginal groups in Israeli poetry. And this is important for me to start with because so frequently Mizrachi poetry will be equated with poetry that is about low income, poverty, discrimination, complaint. And I wanted to make 100% sure that albeit this is true and a solid part of it, and you will see it, it's not only that. The voice of Mizrachi literature has other issues beyond the socio-economical, beyond the critique of being underprivileged, of being discriminated against. And one of the two examples that I'm going to show you is the Almog Behar, a poem about his Arabic. Now, a word about languages and a word about languages that are not Hebrew. In Israel, in the early 50s, the movement, I would say, or the ideology of only Ivrit came at the cost of putting down and looking down on any expression that wasn't Ivrit, not only Arabic. Yiddish was practically forbidden. Immigrants from other countries, such as my own parents, Hungarian, were made fun of for their accents. Okay, although we had great writers like Ephraim Kishon came from Hungary, it didn't matter. But when we discuss the role of Arabic, it's not just that. On top of the general discrimination and the hallelujah, new country, new state, new Jew, everything in Ivrit, there is the additional that this is the language of the enemy. You speak Arabic, you sound like the enemy. So beyond the general discrimination against other languages, you have that added thing. So imagine young children of new immigrants, of families, of Arab speaking families, how enthusiastic are they to learn Arabic? How comfortable do they feel to bring other kids into their homes to hear their parents speak Arabic? It's a whole issue. And one of the people who gave this to me a beautiful, beautiful artistic view is Alon Bihar, and this is where we are going to listen to his poem. For the sake of time, I'm doing only the English, but you have the Hebrew, not in the text that I have sent you, but on the screen. And if you're interested, just let me know, I'll send it to you. My Arabic is mute, strangled in the throat, cursing itself without uttering a word, sleeping in the suffocating air of the shelters of my soul, hiding from my family members behind the shutters of the Hebrew, and my Hebrew erupts, running around between rooms and the neighbors' porches, sounding its voice in public, prophesying the coming of God and bulldozers. And then it settles in the living room, thinking itself openly on the edges of its skin, hidden between the pages of its flesh, one moment naked and the next dressed. It almost makes itself disappear in the armchair, asking for its heart forgiveness. My Arabic is scared, quietly impersonates Hebrew, whispering to friends with every knock on its gates. Ahlan, ahlan, welcome. Ahlan is welcome in Arabic. And in front of every passing policeman, it pulls out its ID card, for every cop on the street pointing out the protective clause. Ana min el Yahud, Ana min el Yahud, I am a Jew, I am a Jew. And my Hebrew is deaf, sometimes so very, very deaf. Now, if you think, ladies and gentlemen, this is just like from, I don't know, 30 years ago, no. This is a contemporary poem, maybe 10 years old. It's still a very strong feeling with people such as Almog Behar, so more or less 40 years of age, by my standards, for sure a young person, very articulate. Now, Al-Mugbihal, I met myself because I organized a few times evenings of reading poetry of an Arab poet and a Jewish poet together, and he was one of the people that I have invited, and we spoke at length about this poem. So if you have any questions about this mixture of feeling, I want you to notice how my best way to describe the place of the Hebrew would be with a Yiddish expression, balabait, like ownership. Like the Hebrew is totally at home, owning the apartment, owning your home, owning your living room, the sofa, the chairs, and then it can leave because it has books, and it can almost disappear. It's so taken for granted. And it makes your Arabic so scared, so ashamed. And now a word about ID cards. That's a sensitive point, and unfortunately, you need me to explain. By law, officially, all of us citizens of the State of Israel, we have to carry an ID card on us. The question, however, is where do I keep mine? And where do Arab citizens keep theirs? I cannot for the life of me remember one single occasion beyond if I drove in a way that needed a policeman to stop me, that I was asked to show an ID card. Not ever. My ID card is normally in my purse and will take you a few long minutes to find every single time had I been asked to. Arab citizens do not keep their ID card in their purses or bags or backpacks. They keep them in their shirt pocket because they are asked so often to show them that they want to have them at hand so they can show them quickly. So it's a small remark. People can, just glitch over it without paying attention, but it's there. If I was only to speak Arabic, and let's add to it, and this is why I gave you his picture, and the way I look, I would be asked immediately to show my ID card. Your comments? And he's a Mizrachi Jew. I need to show you all the time. I'm a Jew, I'm a Jew, I'm a Jew. You think I'm an Arab. You think I'm the enemy just because of that language. The Jews had spoken in all the Arab countries for centuries. Maimonides' writings are in Arabic. But here in this country, it's the languages of the enemy. Gloria, go ahead.
It's just what I'm associating with is in North America, we have a DWB, which stands for driving while black. And
Uh-huh.
if you see a black-skinned person driving in a luxury car, immediately they assume it's a stolen car. The police pull them over and they ask for ID. So it's
Yeah.
guilty until you prove yourself innocent.
And not the other way around. So this is a classical, and it's always good for me to start with it because otherwise immediately we would shift to the poverty and underprivilege where I am getting to, but slowly. And the second one, belonging to the same group, actually the creator of the group Ars Poetica is a second poet today, and hope you will love her as much as I do, Adi Kesar. So look at her picture, and you can see that this is an evening. If you can at least discern the letters, you can see that this is a poetry slam or spoken poetry reading of the organization of this body called Ars Poetica, and here it is on the screen, and here is a D. So just by looking at her is very clear that her parents did not come neither from Poland nor from Hungary. Okay, a D comes from Yemeni descent, but already born in the country, born in Israel. She published her fourth book of poetry just recently, very popular. Teaches now critical poetry in a couple of colleges, and she's very much the upcoming voice. And the poem we are reading is sort of a classic. Adike Sal is one of the first you want to read, and also belongs to that group that is Mizrachi poetry and not about poverty. Okay, so I think you know it, Gloria, but never mind. Black on black, shachor al shachor. My grandma loved me with a heavy accent and spoke to me Yemenite talking, which I have never understood. And as a child, I remember how afraid I had been to stay with her alone, afraid of not understanding the tongue in her mouth, which continued playing its music to me, smiling. And I did not understand one single word she had said. The sounds rang far, far away, even when she spoke to me closely. And I remember once she bought me a pineapple yogurt. And after I had perforated the thin aluminum lid with my thumb and drank it all, I wanted to say thank you, but did not know in what language you should. So I went out to the big garden, picked a flower, and handed it to her, embarrassed. How much awkwardness stood between us of one blood and two silent languages. She washed out the yogurt container wordlessly, filled it with water, and placed the flower I had given her in it. I have never understood one word she had said, my grandmother, but I understood her hands. I understood her flesh, even if she never truly understood the words I said. She only loved my little body, her daughter's daughter. And sometimes the heart is asking for weird things, like learning Yemenite, and to go back to her grave, press your lips to the soil, and yell inside everything that little girl had to say, and mainly to warn her of the flower I had given her, a flower full of ants. Before I invite you to react to this, should you want to, I want to say a word about the pineapple yogurt. Again, a sort of a small hint there. In Israel, even still to this day, there are products on the market, food I mean, whose prices are controlled so that everybody can afford. Bread, eggs, a basic cream cheeses, yogurts, plain. Pineapple yogurt is not controlled. By virtue of that, it's expensive. So for the inner circles of Israelis who get that, what she's saying, I mean, what could this grandmother have lived on? Welfare, old age pension, maybe the help of the family. What work could she have done once she made Aliyah early in the day? Cleaning jobs, manual work. She wasn't a wealthy woman. But when her daughter brings her daughter to stay with her, she will go and get her a pineapple yogurt. So that is special. That is great. Grandma did an effort for me. So that's one. And the other, of course, is this yearning too late in life, the missed opportunity to learn a language that was not given to you. Why was it not given to you? Let me be very honest with you. It is probably, or was probably, the choice of the grandmother herself, telling her daughter as she's growing up in Israel, speak only Hebrew, study hard, make good, advance in life. And to the kids, you should speak only Hebrew at home. They should be real Israelis. So it's not as if I wanted to, or grandma wanted me to learn Yemenite and I didn't. It probably was the choice of her grandmother herself, like oftentimes immigrants would do in many other countries. Be as Israeli as you can, speak the language fluently, no accent, you know? It's enough that you look dark like this. You should have a good language, like I'm adding all the attributes to that. So I wanted you to have these two poems, the Almog Behar one and the Adi Kesar. Any comments or questions?
I don't understand the last two lines. The ants.
A little child went out in the garden, picked up a flower, probably there were a few ants on it, and gave it to her grandmother and never told her to pay attention. And many years later, she remembers that and she feels that she needs to apologize. I think that is my reading of it. And I can tell you an anecdote because I'm friends with Adi on Facebook. Adi is a single mom and she raises her daughter on her own. And she posted a while ago something on Facebook where her daughter from kindergarten brought her a flower and she put it, in water and so on. And I immediately reacted as, and were there ants in the flower? And she said, "Oh, Rachel, how did I not make the connection?" Like she was not thinking about it, and I was. And we both laughed about it. I would not attach any particular symbolic meaning, just, a gaff that little children make, and that the gift was not perfect, and yet it was perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I think a lot of what she says here, I can understand because I grew up that way. My father was German, my mother was Polish, And my mother had a friend who was a psychiatrist, and he said to them, do not teach her English because you all have accents. Teach her only Hebrew and French she'll learn on the street. And when she comes to school, she'll learn English, but she won't have your accent. And I grew up that way until grade 1. And it made no sense to me, but that's the way I grew up. That's the way immigrants grew up, that they wanted so much to be part and parcel of their own heritage. My parents wanted me to be Canadian.
Yeah, sure. And that was the best choice for you, thinking about your future. They
It
didn't
was a
want to
terrible
harm you.
choice. It's a terrible choice for me. I went into grade 1. I didn't know any English. Can you imagine? I went
Yeah.
in kindergarten. I remember going into kindergarten, and the kindergarten teacher showed a picture of a father. And this was the only, I had no contact with anybody there. And I saw the picture of the father and I yelled out, Abba. She looked at me and she says, no. That was the end. I never spoke again the whole year in kindergarten.
Hmm. Well, my parents made a different decision, which totally changed my life at a certain point. I was born in the year 1946, so prior to the state on a kibbutz, and both my parents were immigrants, Holocaust survivors from Hungary. And the major expectation in the kibbutz at the time from these refugees just arriving was to put all the black past behind them, the horrors. And if my mom arrived pregnant, and when the baby is to be born, to speak to them only Hebrew, like, what do you mean, like Hungarian on the kibbutz? And yet, when my parents arrived, there was still one grandma that survived the Holocaust, and she lived long enough for me to have her until I was 8. And with her Holocaust experiences, nobody expected her to learn Hebrew. And my mother and my grandmother made a decision to teach me Hungarian in the years 46 and 47 and 48 on a kibbutz in Israel, like real underground, real rebellion. And they did. And later in life, I kept the Hungarian when I was working for the Jewish Agency in the year 1989, and the communist regime fell apart in Eastern and Central Europe, and the Jewish Agency was looking for people to go out there and start working with the Jewish community, and I was the only person who could speak Hungarian in the education department, and I was sent, and I became instrumental in helping reestablish the Jewish education system in Budapest after the fall of the communist regime. And I ended up writing my PhD about that. So your parents' decision, Becky, took you in one way, and my parents' decision gave me a gift that nobody could know about or appreciate at the time at all. Let's finally come to Shlomi Chatuka, the one we were supposed to do nothing but get to know him, and we are only getting to him at the end of the class. So here's a picture of Shlomi Chatuka, and underneath you can see the emblem of an organization in which he is very active. I wish I had more time to explain about it. It's a sad story in which families, mainly from Yemen, but also other Muslim countries and from the Balkan, in the early 50s when they arrived, and they had many, many children. Sometimes when a child was sick and they were asked, because of the bad conditions in the transit camps, to place the child in a clinic or a hospital, they would come after a few days and they would be told that the child is dead. And there were never papers to show for it, and there was never a grave to show for it. And there were many investigation committees, but their findings were not open to the public yet. And there's grievances among hundreds of Yemenites families about children that had been stolen and given to adoption, mainly to Ashkenazi family, mainly Holocaust survivors who had no children or maybe could not have children. So that pain is still open, although most of the parents whose children disappeared are dead by now, but it's the brothers and sisters or descendants who are keeping up the fight to at least come out with the information and the investigation. So we will get a taste of that, just cleaning and family tree to bringing you into this discourse. These are very, very contemporary poems, books that were published just recently. And so what they are asking for is recognition, justice, and healing. They are not asking for the kids anymore, just for to clear the slate, to tell the truth. So here are pictures of families who testify and show pictures of the babies of this that had disappeared and such. And Shlomi is very active in that. So and he was participating in our class when we studied it. So we gave him really an opportunity to talk about it. So, and you can see that the translators here are the people who work with me in my online classes. So this is called Cleaning, and it's translated by Michael Bonin and Heather Silverman and myself. My mother wipes away the dirt hidden in corners, erases stains and marks from the floor, makes fingerprints disappear from the door handles, even shines the plastic joints that strangle the neck of the lamps, clears the dust off the piano and the books, straightens the crooked pictures, sharpens times and the times and the forks and the knives, places them in rows and columns in the removable drawers, covers the windows with curtains so nothing can be seen inside, only the sun is reflected in them. And when all is clean and in order, she showers, gets dressed, and rushes home to warn her children. Against what? What do you think she warns her children about? Anybody?
Not to become like her.
Not to become like her, to learn a better
To learn
profession.
better.
Hmm? Anything else? Anybody? Hmm. Okay, let me suggest the following. Let us do the second poem and then have a little bit of conversation about both of them. Now, here I want to bring you into the Israeli culture, and that is that when your kids in Israeli schools reach the ages of bar bat mitzvah, so 12 for the girls, 13 for the boys, and so that the whole class can do it together, it's normally done on seventh grade, where the boys already are doing their bar mitzvah and the girls had their bat mitzvah in recent months. And one of the projects they do is a family tree, and it's called Avodat Shorashim, which literally translates into roots work, or do a project about your roots, which is actually a family tree. So looking back on that, as he probably had to do it in school, and now he comes back to the memory when he is an adult. Well, you want to find out about my family tree? I will tell you about my family tree. On my mother's side, I am third generation born to cleaning ladies who scrubbed the stairs for Ashkenazim and polished their mirrors. On my father's side, second generation to a young man who wanted to be a singer, but was sentenced to be part of the audience. In our home, the living room was a prison, and the TV set an instrument of torture. Through bulletproof glass, a shrieking raven taunts him from a tall branch. On my grandmother's side, grandson of Shulamit, who paid her dues to the Jewish agency, one daughter. And on my grandfather's side, I descend from Salah Suleiman, who built his kingdom in a synagogue, because those who cut off his side locks left him no other corner. Those who stole his books left him no place in which to meet his faith. No matter how high their family tree may climb, there you will never find God. So if you go very slowly through this, you can see the whole list of grievances, not yet totally economical, but it's there already. The being imprisoned, if you wish, into dead-end jobs because there was no chance for education. The being imprisoned by an Ashkenazi television in which there was never a chance for Mizrachi singers to be invited to any of the programs for new talent or whatever, just suffer. One grandmother whose one of her daughters had disappeared, so look at the irony, she paid her dues to the Jewish agency, one daughter. And the other thing, and this is like totally proven, unlike the children where the papers and the documents are still closed and secret and cannot be published, the other thing is pretty well known in research, is that when the Yemenite immigrants came, they had brought with them precious ancient prayer books and Torah scrolls and such, oftentimes covered with silver covers and jewelry and such, which had all disappeared or been stolen and never returned to the community. And also the trend of making everybody out Israeli, every Israeli, their traditional side locks were cut. So we lost the sidewalk and we had a miserable little synagogue in the neighborhood, which was the only thing left for us because the books have been stolen. And grandmother was grieving for her daughter who had disappeared. And my father could never adjust to the culture. And this is my family tree, third generation of cleaning ladies. Bevakasha. Here I am. And I'm looking at my watch and I'm thinking maybe 2 masks as well. How many years does it take to tear off the shame that became a mask, that like war disrupted the body, that caused the eyes to hate the skin, the ears to hate the music, that the tongue played, the lips blamed the throat for the accent, the body rejected the embrace, the tongue rejected the taste, the nostril the scent of the rooms, the cupboards, the clothes. The immigration prevented the revival of memories, the inheritance of stories. The heart did not recognize itself. But this is your lot as a man, even when you return to yourself and tear the mask of your face, you will find that you still need to tear it piece by piece off the world. So now put them all together, the cleaning one, the family roots or the family tree, and the last one, the mask, which is really about the shame of being who you are. Yes, Gloria.
Rachel, you made a beautiful Freudian slip when you were reading the last poem. If you put it on the screen,
Imagination.
What did I do?
if you put it on the screen, I
Of
will
course
show
I
you.
will. Of
It
course I
was
will.
it was so apt, apropos.
Here it is.
Imagination.
Okay, yes, okay. So
Oh,
Becky, you saw it.
imagination,
You
and I said
said the
immigration.
immigration prevented the
Immigration,
revival of
right.
memories. And
Yeah,
I
the-
thought that you said it all, Rachel. You left nothing for us to comment on. That was exquisite. Um,
And still,
but still, you know, my sense is it's so painful to try and put yourself in the place of people who have had their culture torn from them. I wanted to go back to the cleaning lady one because what she has to warn her children is also in the poem about closing the curtains while she's cleaning, that that you keep for private, your private shame, you know, and unfortunately, I don't think there's any shame. I just cleaned my house. I open the curtains. I want people to see that I'm dusting and cleaning my house. But anyway, it's
But it's yours. It's not another person's house.
exactly. But still, I mean, if you do your work with pride, it's a source of pride for you, as
Mhm.
opposed to something that you need to feel ashamed of. But anyway.
So the mother is ashamed of the cleaning, and the son is sort of, in an ironical way, describes his family roots. I mean, there must be another poem that could have been written about the real roots of the rabbis and the singers and the poets in Yemen that were in the family before. It's as if he's saying it doesn't matter here in this country what my real family roots were like. This is what you guys know about us. So that, and the last one, which is the most painful one, is to coming to terms with who you are, and not, rejecting your color, your accent, your throat, the way you pronounce letters that come from home, that which was taken away from Adi, and from the child that she had been. She was not allowed to learn to speak like a Yemenite, and he was. Okay.
But Rachel, your
Anymore.
parents managed to instill in you a love for your Hungarian
My
culture,
mother, yes,
the
my
mother.
mother,
And
absolutely.
I'm saying there's also a commentary on parenting styles. I don't want to point fingers or blame anybody, but there are parents who are proud of their heritage and manage the duality of teaching their children how to adapt to the modernity and the difference in their adopted land, but also to have a love and reverence for everything that came before that.
My mother somehow managed to balance her total hatred and anger at
Yeah.
the fascist and Nazi Hungarian collaborators, and her love to the poetry and the culture and the music of the language, which is unbelievable, but she managed to do that for me. Yeah.
So you're
Anybody
okay to
else?
have your citizenship card now.
Thank you. Which I am getting these days. Yes. It was complicated, and I waited 12 years after she died. Yeah, before I asked for it. Anyway, any more comments about Mizrachi poetry? Or this is the right time also to conclude all 4 sessions. So if you look back on, no matter how many you have done, each one of you, what is your takeaway from our experience together?
Mine is that I'm going to see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
You can never get too much of Rachel Korazim. So for those of you who are shy to comment out loud, we'll see you tomorrow if you look for Korazim.com.
Well, the complexity of Israeli society, my goodness, it's enough to bowl you over. I mean, really, the complexity of it all, and
It is
and
very.
yet, yeah. Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks so much for the selection today again. And I think you help kind of remind us of the power of poetry. I mean, that haunting line, she goes back to warn her children and leaves it open-ended. So poetry does that. It then gets us thinking and draws us into a situation to think about it some more, to feel it. I find, very, very moving, these poems. And I think, for example, she warns them about the secrets, because very ironically, in cleaning, she's removing.
She will find out stuff.
Yeah, and she's removing, as it were, the traces of things. But the warning to the children is there are secrets hidden behind those curtains, yeah.
Things they need to hide.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you
Well,
very
the
much.
other side of, I mean, it's really the underbelly of the society that can be expressed. with such beauty, eloquence, and dignity in a way, even though the poems themselves come from so deeply inside the gut of the poets. So, and thank you for your way of bringing it out also is really extraordinary.
And
So
you
I thank you.
notice that it's never the first generation who speaks out.
Yeah.
You have to wait for the second generation, for the children born to these parents who will start carrying the torch, and actually speaking up for their parents, not only for themselves. And it's very much like what I belong to, the second generation of survivors. It's not our parents who spoke up. It's us who got involved, in teaching and curriculum writing and poetry writing and such. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much. My own classes for the summer will conclude tomorrow. You can always go to my website, korosim.com, for many, many, many recorded sessions, all free. And if you want to email me, you can do that through the website, or remember that my email is korosim@gmail.com. So, like the address, it's all just my last name and then whatever you have to add. I can add you to my mailing list. There will be a few classes during the summer and I will be writing about them. But other than that, we will come back to once a week studying after the high holidays, not before that. But there will be stuff during the summer. So thank you very much. And I
Thank you
hope to
very
see
much.
all of you, some of you, in any of my future activities, or hopefully even in Israel or Montreal. So bye bye, and thank
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Much.
Bye.